Hello everybody and welcome to my tutorial. Today I'm going to be talking about how to paint normal maps in Cinema 4D. Now this is something that I found to be extremely helpful and very useful, especially for creating kind of more organic objects. And what normal map painting is, and I'm just going to show you some examples of some of the stuff of what I've made with it. Here's a perfect example, is normal maps can create depth on your object for like shadows and stuff. It can make it look like it has fine details on the surfaces without taking up any extra polygons. You can have a very low poly but high detailed object by doing this. And instead of using the conventional method of like making procedural textures with noise, you can paint them by hand, which creates very kind of organic looks and can make very realistic results. What you're actually seeing here is a black and white bump map that I painted and then put that in my reflectance channel for my roughness. Now there's a little bit more going on here than just that. I also have that same map also in my alpha for that with two levels of reflectance going on in there, as well as it in my bump and my normal map at the same time. But we're going to talk about that more in depth later on. But this is just some examples of some of the stuff you can make with it. And I've made some different versions of these things too, part of my daily series for this week of making just some kind of painted reflectance on different things. And if you'd like to check some of this stuff out, feel free. You can head to my website at epicjcreations.com, or you can click the little circle in the top right corner there. It'll take you there, and you can just scroll down and click on my Instagram page to take a look at those if you want. But without further ado, let's get to it. One of the first things you're going to want to do is we're going to need some type of object to paint. Now, what we're probably going to do is going to model something real quick, because if we use a primitive, I'm just going to click up here on this cube. If we use just a plain primitive, one of the problems we're going to have is that primitives are already properly UV mapped, meaning they have a perfect UV layout already right off the bat. And that's one of the things we need to set up, is we need to actually unwrap the UVs inside of Body Paint UV Editor. So if we were to use this primitive here, it wouldn't really demonstrate some of the issues that could come up, because everything would work perfectly smooth because everything's done right out of the box for you, which is very nice that they do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some very quick and easy modeling. I'm just going to select my cube, and I'm going to do that for you. I'm going to select my cube and then press C on my keyboard to make it editable. Then we're going to go to polygon mode and do Control A, and this is very quick editing, so don't worry if you want to do something a little bit nicer. This is just quick, rough, and dry. This works on any object you want to use. But for this course, we're just going to take the cube, do Control A to select all the polygon points. So if I select one, there's one. I'm just going to Control A to select them all, right click, and then do Extrude Inner. And we're just going to pull it. Doesn't matter how much, because we're going to type in an exact number under here. I'm going to set the offset to 50. Then I'm going to right click and then press extrude and just pull that to whatever number you want, and we're going to type in 100, and that, oops, sorry, not 10, we're going to do 100, there we go, and that's what our editing is going to be. Now we want this to look a little bit more organic, so what we're going to do is we're going to click up here, and we're going to create a subdivision surface and put our cube underneath that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to click on that subdivision surface and set this to a level of 3 right here. And now we have a much more smooth, organic kind of looking shape, as ugly as it kind of is, but very, very good for the purposes we're going to be using now. So I'm going to click on my subdivision surface and press C on my keyboard. Now we have made that editable with the subdivision surface changes underneath that, and you can see our polygons are here. If you're not actually seeing these lines, just press NB on your keyboard. That'll put you in Garrod shading lines, which is a great way to show you that what the polygons are looking like on your object. But right now, we're actually good to go. So with our object selected, let's go up to the Layout tab up here. For me, mine's set to standard right now. Yours might be something different. But whatever it is, just click on it. And then go to Body Paint BP UV Edit. That's what you're going to click on there. And this is going to bring us into the Body Paint UV Editor. Now, don't worry if this is a little scary for you and this is your first time being here. We're going to go through the entire process and talk this through very easy, button by button, to figure all this out. And you might be surprised at how easy this process actually is. So what we're going to do is we're first going to make sure our object's selected by clicking down here. And over here on the right is our body paint UV map for our object. So the UV map on our object is going to be over here. Now, we can't see anything because we're not in polygon mode. Now, when we're in body paint UV mode, we have two type of polygon selections. We have the actual polygon selections, and then we have the ones on the UV map. And there's two different types of tools to select up here to kind of show that. Different modes, I should say. Now, this is the UV map. See these little checkerboard things here? This is the UV map mode, and this is the standard polygon mode. So if we just click standard polygon mode, you can see our selection has stayed from before. I'm just going to press E on my keyboard to get to my move tool. And we're going to select any old point. And you can see we can move it around. I'm going to Control Z to undo that, like we've always been able to do in any polygon editing mode. But if we click over here to the UV map one, and we do Control A to select them all, you can see they've all up. We have a new mesh over here, and this is our UV map. So I'm just going to select any old point here. And notice if I drag, nothing's moving here, but over on the right it is. I'm going to Control Z to undo that. What we're moving is not the polygons in 3D space, but the polygons actually on our map. Now be aware, when we move polygons on the map here, it has no effect on the position of these polygons here. We're just moving the 2D representation of this polygon for us to be able to paint on it. So this is our canvas right here that we're going to paint on. And this here is the 3D representation of what we painted on has been on in 3D space. So basically, polygons in here don't get moved when you move them over here. So that's a good thing to kind of just keep in mind. So we're not actually moving them, we're just rearranging the shape of our canvas. So I'm going to Control Z a few times to undo that. And what we need to do now is Control A. Now here is how we're going to unwrap this. Let me just point out too, that there is much better ways of going about this. And it gets way more in-depth than what I'm showing now. This is a very simplified version, but it does pretty decent results. This is the very simple way that I did for all my objects that I skinned. And it gets the job done. I would highly not recommend this as a professional way of continuously unwrapping your UVs. Highly recommend, if you haven't already done so, look up some tutorials on it and get more information about how to properly unwrap UVs in Cinema 4D. But for this one, we're just going to go with all our UVs selected. We're going to click here. Make sure on this UV polygon tool to Control A to select them all so they're all yellow. Then we're going to go over here. We're going to click on Projection. Yours might be another one of these tabs, but just click Projection right here. And then what you're going to click on is Box. Ignore all these other ones. You can go through and we can click them. This will be a spherical projection, a cylinder, a frontal, a flat. You can click all these if you want, but the one that's the best is Box. And it looks about the same as Box 2. Now to explain a little bit of what's actually happening when you're clicking these buttons. For example, for Box, Box is basically taking a invisible box, literally that's what the name implies, around your object, and then it's squishing all the polygons onto that box around it, and then it's flattening them out. It cuts the box up into pieces and just smacks it out flat, and you can see the shape of our object here. Now this is already pretty nice, but we're not actually using up very good real estate for our plane here, for our painting board, I should say. So by that what I mean is this gray area, this little box that's surrounding our other object here, is our canvas that we're going to be painting on. And since these only fill up a very small portion of that area, that canvas, if we were to paint for, say, a 4K map right here, what is actually going to happen is we're not going to be using the 4K map. We're going to have a 4K file that takes 4K difficulties in loading, like the issues that 4K can have on file transfer and stuff, and the bandwidth, or transferring that, not really bandwidth, but hard drive data space, and the load times of a 4K image. But we're not actually going to be displaying that in the actual 3D space because we're only using about a third of our board space here. So if we were to do a 4K map, it would have all the issues of 4K, but not the benefits, because we're only using a small amount of that to actually paint on. So to fix that, we need to increase the size of our UV map here. And here's how we're going to do that. We're going to go to Relax UVs, and this is something that I'm going to point out real quick. that this is a really important process for professionally unwrapping your UVs, where you create seams and lines to cut. We're not going to touch this in this one because we're going to be using a very simplified version. We're just going to basically skip it. But if you want properly unwrapped UVs, this is the way to go. But we're just going to skip that and just head straight to optimal mapping. And we're going to set this to cubic, optimal cubic, and we're going to preserve orientation. Do not stretch to fit. If we do stretch to fit, it'll basically stretch our cube so it's so much taller, or not really our cube, but our object here. It'll stretch it along some of the axes, so when we paint, if we tried to paint a perfect circle, it would turn out to be an oval. And I'm not going to demonstrate this, but trust me, you definitely don't want that on. And leave everything at default, which is maximum area factor 0, relation steps 0, and spacing 2. And we're just going to click apply. And what it has done is much better aligns all our pieces to take up more real estate. Now it is kind of, it may be a little messy. It's pretty clean, but it is a little messy as far as our seams. We have a lot of seams everywhere. But that's not going to be too big of a problem. It will show up on some spots, and that's particularly why I modeled this type of object, because it makes these seams that show up very evident if you don't do a good unwrap. But now that we have this done, we're good to go. So now we can just click Body Paint and UV Edit and click on, and we're just going to head back to Startup actually just to show you. There we go, we're done, we've left. And here we go, we have our properly done UV map. Now what we need to do is start painting. So all we got to do is click Startup and go to Body Paint 3D Paint. And this is going to bring us into the painting editor. Now if you've never been in Body Paint before, don't worry. There is a very easy process here as well. A little bit harder than in the UV unwrapping, but we really only did a few things. It's just kind of understanding what's going on. So don't worry, this is going to be explained in detail, the full process as before. Now, one of the biggest things I found in body paint is a lot of people feel it's kind of clunky and hard to get around in, and it is in the beginning, and it could use some revamping. But one of the clunkiest things about it, in fact, the most clunky thing about it, in my opinion, is this button right up here, the Paint Setup Wizard. I would absolutely, highly not recommend using this thing. It is what makes body paint so complicated. I prefer the manual approach for all my textures, doing everything manual without that. What this thing would do is it literally would unwrap the UVs for us. It would take the texture we had on it and set everything up in literally one series of steps. And we just got the UV map though set up in a better way than how it would have made it, mind you, too. So we're not going to use him. We're going to do the manual approach. Now, one of the things I forgot to put on our object before we can paint is right now we don't have a texture on it, so we can't paint it. Like, this is just a plain object. We have to actually have a texture on our object for it be able to be paintable. So I'm just going to click Body Paint 3D Edit and head back to my Startup menu here. Sorry that we're bouncing around a bit. We're going to double click here to create a new texture, or you could just click Create and then New Material. And drag this onto our object. Now first I'm going to leave this UV tool. I'm just going to go to Object Mode. Drag that on there. Now we're going to open our texture real quick. We're going to turn, we're going to leave color on. It doesn't really matter. We are going to turn reflectance off because the specular kind of bothers me. But this is an important part when painting. Choose the channels that you want to paint in and turn them on. For this one, we're not going to paint in color. This is what's going to make this unique, is we're not going to be painting just flat 2D color. We're going to be painting bump. Now, you can't paint normal maps directly. I know that we're talking about how to paint normal maps in Cinema 4D, but as far as I know, there's no actual way to paint a normal map in Cinema 4D directly, because a normal map is made up of multiple colors. And basically, it's made up of blues, greens, and reds, depending on which type of normal map. So it would be an extremely messy and unintuitive and unenjoyable process from what I imagine of trying to paint that. It would be not too much fun, unless you had a program that was designed to paint that way for you, so you just literally paint by hand. A perfect example is Quexel or Modo or Mario, many other painters. Substance Painter, that's another very good one. And I'm botching up my names. Modo is not a 3D painting program, it's a modeling program. But basically, what you do for Cinema 4D, just to use this directly, is take your bump channel here, and we're going to paint a black and white image, because that's what bump channels read. They read black and white images. So we take our bump channel, and we're going to turn that on, and we're going to leave everything else off except for color, and we can just close it. And we've made sure it's been applied. We're going to head back over to our body paint tab right here. And here it is, our object is sitting here. Now what we're going to do is, we have all these tabs here. Now don't worry, these might be a little confusing, but we're just going to work our way from the right side to the left side. So starting from the right, we're going to click Objects, make sure our object is selected, our material is applied. We can see it's the same object panel that we're used to looking at under the standard view, except it's normally up here. Now we're going to click on is Materials. Here is the material that we applied. We only have one material in our scene. Now if you have more of them in your scene or on your objects, you're going to see that row here, and you could name them as well. But you can see there's an X here. That means this is not paintable, it's not in body paint, it's not being calculated or anything. But if we click this red X, we turn it on so we can paint on it. Now, we could go over here and select the brush tool, and we could try to paint on it, but you can see it's locked out, and if we click, nothing happens. And that's because in painting, we need to paint more than just what material we want to paint on. We have to tell body paint more than that. We have to tell them what channel on this material do we want to paint on. And to do that, this is something that you normally set up in the wizard that is a very horribly clunky process in my opinion, opposed to the much better manual way, which is just by right-clicking the texture, the material, and then going to texture channels. So all we did was we just hover our mouse over here, right-click on the material, go over to texture channels, and then pick the one we wanted to make. And we want a bump channel, and we're going to click on that. Now what it's going to ask is it's going to say, okay, you want us to paint in this channel. What type of canvas size would you like to paint on? What would your canvas like to be? And I want a width of 4,000 and a height of 4,000. Yours might not be this big. It might be something else. But type in 4,000 or whatever number you'd like. I found that 4,000 gives the best resolution results. If you go too low, your paint's going to look blocky and not very realistic. Now, down here, you can ignore the rest of these. I usually like to set my bits per channel to 16-bit though. Set that to grayscale and use plain color. Also, make sure it's a new texture and not from disk. You can actually load painting UVs or painting kind of pictures from your disk if you want, but that's a different topic altogether. But this is an important thing down here is set your color channel to black. Now in bump maps, black is pushing down and white is pushing up, and somewhere in the gray is basically flat. So we want our bumps that we're painting to be kind of indentations pushing outward, like build-ups of corrosion or something on the outside pushing away from the object. So we're going to make the whole thing black, and we're going to paint white on top of it. So now that we have that set, we're going to press OK. You can see it says B for bump, and there's our color, and it's black. Now we're good to go on that. We're going to go over here to swatches, and we can just ignore this. This is just different quick colors that you can select to paint with. We're not going to really touch that now. What we are going to do though is go to brushes right here, and this means that we can pick a brush to paint with. And if we open up this little folder, there's actually a ton of choices. Body Paint gives you a ton of free brushes. It's amazing how many there are. One of my favorite ones though is just clicking on Body Paint presets, this one here, then opening brushes, and you can see all the ones we have to choose from. Then we open up standard, and we're just do a plain airbrush. We're just going to click on that. Now we're going to go to layers. Now this is just like the layers in Photoshop pretty much. All we have is our basic background layer. If we click this button here, create a new layer for us to paint on, and we'll call this bump. The way we name that is I double clicked it here. I double click to allow myself to name that. Now that that's been named, when we paint on this layer, we can delete it basically, and it won't harm our object at all. So we can paint on the bump channel and just turn it on and off so we can see what our changes have done to our object. Highly recommend doing this. That way if you mess something up, you can just literally delete the layer and you don't have to go undo a bunch of times. But now we're finally ready to click colors and choose what color we'd like to paint with. color that we choose to paint with here is what's actually going to generate the bump channel. So since the whole thing is already black in the bump channel, and you can't really see this because we're looking at our color channel right now, which that's actually pretty good because seeing an all black object is not very intuitive for painting whatsoever. But we're going to take this and we're just going to pull this all the way up, and an important thing to note, you can see the channels that we're choosing our color for. Here is color. If we click this, we're choosing our color channel. If we click over here on the B, we're choosing the color for our bump channel. We want our bump channel to be painted in white. It's also choosing what channel we're going to be painting on, which is actually not what's happening here. I'm sorry, I messed that up. You're not choosing the channel that you're painting on here. To choose that, you go over to Materials and choose your channel that you're painting on here. So now that we have our color chosen and it is white, if we bring our mouse over, we also have to make sure, you may be seeing a little red kind of warning symbol like that. That's because you need to select the paintbrush right here. It's going to bring this up, and it'll then allow you, and I'm just going to zoom in here, it will then allow you to paint on your object. So let's just left click and start painting around and see what happens. And you can see it very interesting that we are painting normal maps, and you can see the depth. It does look like indentations pushing outward on the object. Now, one thing to make this a little easier is let's get rid of these lines that are on our object. Let's do NA to get rid of those. Now we can continue to paint. Now, one thing I want to point out is see here. Let's zoom in a little bit to kind of get a look at this. See how I'm getting this? This is our UV seams. This is basically our object's not able to cross this path because this is where a UV seam is crossing. If I hop over to my texture channel and I go to UV mesh show UVs, we can see here what our UVs look like. And basically we're painting here. I'm painting along here, then boop, I hit this edge and it doesn't cross. And this is actually connected by one of these pieces here. Now, it was kind of tricky because our UV map is set up over here. So if I'm painting here, we cross the line, it needs to cross out over here to actually continue our object. Now I'm not positive it's one of these materials here for sure, but or these shapes rather. It could be any number of these. It's hard to tell, but that's basically the issue that's happening. But there is a fix for it. The fix that we're looking for here is basically allowing us to do something called projection painting, where when we paint, our paintbrush is going to paint over top of this edge and then across to the other one. By that I mean it's not going to paint relative to the space here. So we're not painting like flat on a canvas, just on a wrapped around on this object. We're actually going to paint in 3D space in projection. It'll apply that for us. So by that I mean if I try to paint, it's my push to talk kind of give me some issues there. If I try to paint a straight line across from here, and you may notice that I'm not actually able to paint now. That's because I need to go to Object, select my object, and then select Materials and select Bump, then our brush. There we go. Now I'm painting. Now draw a line across. It's having issues on that seam because it won't detect, because when my brush is up here, it's not actually painting down here. And that is because it's trying to figure out where those seams are. It's getting all glitched up. So if I turn on projection painting here, turn this on. It'll take a little bit to queue up, but there we go. Now if I drag a line across, look what happened. It goes perfectly right there. Now if we try and move, it's going to take a little time to write that in, but basically what just happened is if I go over here to my texture tool, we basically, and you can see it happening here, it's been updated now for us, is when I try to paint across from here, it bumps into this spot where it sees nothing. It already knows the polygon that I'm drawing on is one of these right here, and we can actually see the guy right here. Or it's one of these. It's this one up here, I think. It already knows that we're crossing into that one there. So what it's doing is it's just basically running it over for us. So as I cross this line here, it's connecting in back over here. So it makes the process so simple for us. And yeah, that's basically it. Now, if you want to make yours look a little bit like mine, We're not going to go into super detail, and it's going to look messy and it's going to look ugly, but this is where it could be a little boring watching me work, but so I'm just going to do something really quick. We're just going to, I don't know, smear some stuff around. We can cross his lines, move so it projects that down. So basically what's happening is if I paint, I'm going to paint some here. This paint, when I'm done painting now, like I'll just paint like this, then I'll stop. Basically what it's doing here is it's kind of holding it. It's holding in a frontal projection, like we're looking flat on our object, and when we move, it then kind of pastes that down like a picture, like boom, it stamps it down. Actually is the paint. So I'm going to try and move, and now see how it disappears, and I watch when I let go and stop moving. It loads up, and it projects it on. Now you're seeing here, we are getting a little bit of problems with our seams. Now you are going to still have some issues with your seam, with your normal map. Now we can render with Control R as the command, and you can see it makes it look a little bit better. Still kind of messy, still kind of yucky. So you kind of have to work with these seams. This is why it's better to skin it properly. That's why I made it on an object like this, to kind of show you the issues that can come up. But we can work around that. So what we're going to do is we can just paint along these seams and kind of get those out. So if we paint kind of like this, and we can see the seams as we're painting. We're just kind of painting over top of them, getting them out. And if we reproject that by moving, then rendering, you can see we've cleaned those seams out mostly here, and they're only up there now. What I like using though is a different brush. Let's head back to our brushes. And what we're going to use is a chalk. We're going to click this here. One thing interesting to note about chalk is if we paint here, it'll put down some kind of nice gritty kind of feel to it. Like you can see chalk's got this kind of like really kind of organic feel, and you can kind of bring it through this stuff. But you'll notice as we're painting here, we're not getting any more information. Like I'm painting and I'm seeing nothing. That's because this spot we already painted and it's already pure white. So we can't make white more white. It's just as pure white as it gets. So the bump's already going as high as it can. So it's limited to how much you can go up with it. If we could change this though, reversely, we could go to colors and set this to black, and then when we paint, we're painting black into that white, and then we're pushing back down. So this is pushing down, and then the white's pushing up. So we could do a gray as well, and we could paint like a semi bump in through everything. But we're going to keep this at white. And we're going to go to brushes, and we're going to pick chalk, and we're going to expand its size a bit. And we're just kind of going to go crazy and just have fun. Like I recommend just painting around and have fun. Like this is a lot of fun painting stuff like this. It's really interesting, like what you can do. But I'm just going to basically do this. We've already been going on a little bit longer than this tutorial should. Sorry, my tutorials end up a little rambly at times. I need to work on that. I definitely need to work on that. But I love talking about this stuff, so I love explaining this to you guys. But now that we got this, let's go and grab. I love this tool here. We could use like an oil soft. This is kind of nice. And right now I'm just kind of showing off what you can do with this thing. If I paint here an empty space, nothing happens. That's because you need a color to push with oils. So with oil brushes. So if we take this here where we have color, and we see I pull here nothing, but as soon as I pull over, grab this and slide back out, now we have like oils coming with us. So you can create like really interesting kind of pull offs, and if you have a Wacom or a Wacom, then you can really create incredible results with your brush and your pen on here. It's really fun. Like that's what I normally paint with, but I'm just using my mouse here. But now that we have all that, I want to show one more thing before we call it done, to show how I kind of made that objects that I was making. And that's by scrolling to the very bottom and opening, and actually I'm going to close this one here to make it a little easier. I'm just going to close the whole body paint presets folder and open instead the body paint artist brush. And in here they have a slew of brushes. We're going to open this one up here, and they have a ton of preset abstract brushes, circles, you name it, that you can stamp onto your object. Here we go. Here's a nice brush. But just by clicking once, boom, we have this very kind of organic shape here. It's pretty cool. Like the very, or kind of not really organic, but like very cool pattern. And then just go through, pick a different brush, stamp that on, pick another brush, stamp that on, and that's literally how I made my objects. Is I just ran around. It's very messy. I'm not very good painting at all. I'm actually quite bad at painting. We can just stamp some of that there, stamp some of this here, some of that there, and just kind of run with whatever you want to go with, and play with all these folders. Like I highly recommend. It's a ton of fun. Little symbol things here, and this is a really cool trick, just like in Photoshop. If we click here once, just click any place, then move our mouse anywhere and hold down left shift. While holding down left shift, then click again. You got that. So the full process is don't press anything, just left click once, then hold down left shift and then click again. And there you go. Click, left shift, click. And you can create these perfect drawn lines, just like in Photoshop. It's pretty neat. We're going to get like a little grid here. Just place that any old spot just kind of in there, abstract. Another nice one. Now we can get some brushes down here. We have like grunge or this kind of nice words, whatever those say. He has a ton of like cool stuff. And more words. And this is going to actually show an interesting issue that projection painting can give you. I'm going to click right here. Notice how on the left side up here my brush is hanging off the edge. I'm going to click. See how that disappears around the edge there? If we turn and take a look and see what happened. This is where we get issues. So this, because projection painting is literally what its name implies. We're painting in a projection of where we're looking. So a flat projection of where we're looking. And because we painted that and it just shot off here out of view, it just cut off into nothingness and caused issues. So you can fix that up by going up and getting another brush. Like we could use this little cool arrow tool. And we could paint with that actually too, so we can paint out some of that issue. It's kind of cool what you can do, and you can also click left shift, click, and just keep holding down left shift and clicking to move around. But now this is turning into more of like a painting tutorial, how to like paint, not really focusing on normal maps anymore. So let's just finish this up with one last thing. Do like this, whatever this is. More words. We'll zoom those down. I'm pressing the kind of like the two keys next to the P button. I think they're tilde keys. Where instead of doing that to change your size, you could just drag this slider. We'll do like maybe a 108. Click, click, click. We'll get these last brushes from this guy here. I won't even try and pronounce that. I'll mess it up so bad. We're going to open up this folder and get some of these arrows because I love these. Shrink this size down and just select these. And I know this tutorial is getting a little long as it is, but one more thing I like to talk about is you have actually these buttons here you can click next to these tools that you can change the size, pressure, rotation, or spacing of these objects, and even more stuff if you have a pen hooked up, or depending on what brush you're using. So say, for example, that when I paint with this brush, I don't like it how my arrows are always pointing the same direction every time. So I can go under rotation, click on that little thing, and then I can adjust this to rotate under different things, such as pen pressure, tilt, direction, the finger wheel, rotation. But instead of that, I want to do draw direction or draw distance, and I want distance. And I'm going to set this to a pixel length of 20, loops 1, and this is just a F curve, kind of what's happening there. We're just going to leave this all. Just check that box on, press OK. Now when we click, they stay the same, but watch when I drag and paint. You can kind of see it there. The arrow's rotating, so we're just going to adjust our spacing. Now what this does is how far we have to move before it puts down another brush, and it'll be pretty evident what's happening here. And now you can see, and we'll space this a little bit more. Now you can see that our arrows are spinning around in circles. Now you travel only one loop because we set that to do only one loop. So we'll start at the top, and we'll do 1, 2, 3, 4, and we're back, and then we just stay here. So if we open up spacing, or not spacing, rotation again, we can set that to, say, 50 loops, and it'll go 50 times around, and we can just keep going around and around before it gets stuck, which that's just a kind of a cool thing. Little fun little trick there. I think that's all good for here. I think we're pretty good. Yep, I'm just going to call this done for this. I've spent enough time kind of painting here. This is probably very boring watching me do this. So now that we're done painting here, we're literally ready to go. Now, one thing I want to talk about real quick is saving. This is something you might have already bumped into already. And I probably should have mentioned this sooner, but yeah, sorry about that. Let's just save real quick. I'm going to do Control S to save this project. Now, I already have it saved at a spot on my hard drive, but now that I've made this this new painting texture, if I do Control S, it's going to ask something. Do you want to save changes to the texture of project painting normal maps? And that's what I've named my project, Painting Normal Maps in Cinema 4D. And if I click yes, in the same location where I saved my Cinema 4D file, it's going to save a picture, the one that we generated when we made that bump map. Remember when we typed out 4K on there and picked that color to be all black? That was the canvas or the picture for the base paint. So when I click save, it's going to generate that. Now I can show you real quick what that's going to look like if I hop over here. Here's the actual location where I saved it, and here is our bump channel. And I'm going to double click to open this and pull it over, and this is the painting that we did. This is the actual map. Now let's try to see what we can do something to make this real evident. I'm going to pull this out of the way. Let's paint something more on here. Kind of a blank spot. Where is it blank? Down here. Now we're going to add more to it. There we go, just that. And I'm going to Control S again. It's going to ask us, would you like to save that again? We're going to say yes. It's going to overwrite the old one and add more on. So now we go back over here. Here's the old one. And here's the new one. So now we can compare. This one's just saved in RAM. This one doesn't exist anymore. So as soon as I close this one, it won't show up anymore. But we can actually see some changes somewhere that makes this one different. Now we're playing a game of which one's different and which one's not. This one has some that this one doesn't. But basically, it's kind of hard to see. We did add changes that changed it. But it's very cool that you can just paint and then have this. So this is the actual map that we saved. So I guess I've spent enough time talking about that. But here we go. We got all that done. And now let's just click on Body Paint right up here. And we're going to go back to Standard. And you can see everything's ported over. And if we open our texture and take a look at the bump channel, see right here that we have that map right inside of it. This same map right here is in the channel right there. So what we can do is we can try and render this right now just by rendering. And there is our normal map. And we can make a light and, or not our normal map, that's our bump map, sorry. We can pull out this here, and one cool thing to know is you may still have your brush mode up, so just click here, and that's going to change the look of our texture dramatically. And it looks different from when we were painting in body paint, because when we're painting on our texture in body paint, there's no texture scaling. You know what I mean by that is to save time on the GPU, it actually shrunk the resolution of a texture on our object in the preview. Now we can change that just by double-clicking our texture, going down to Editor, and change texture preview size from default to no scaling. It'll update, and there you go. Now we have it nice. So if we render, it looks all pretty. Just a note though, if we do have it set to default and we render, it looks exactly the same. So this preview size has nothing to do with the render. It just makes it easier on your GPU to preview it in 3D space. But I kind of like having it to no scaling because it makes it a lot easier to see it. So basically now we have this. Let's finally get down to the normal map part. Sorry it took so long to get here. What we do is we just click on bump, we click here, and we do copy, which is, if I can find it, right here. Click copy, and we've copied the texture. And then we're going to click on normal, we're going to click here, and we're going to go to paste channel. Now, one thing to note, when we were painting in a bump map, it gave us the results as if we were painting a normal map. A bump map and a normal map do the same exact thing, almost, relatively. The same results, rather. A bump map uses black and white values to determine a height map for how high the bump is going to be. For normal maps, it uses a blue, a green, and red, or possibly rainbow, depending on the type of normal map. You have three types. You have, and up here we can actually see them, the type. We have a tangential normal map, which is kind of blues, and mostly blue with some red and green. And then you have object-based normal maps, which these are full rainbow. Every color in the rainbow spectrum are used for these. And then you have world normal maps, and they look almost exactly the same as object normal maps. So basically what we're going to do here now is keep this tangent, because that's the type of normal map we're going to create here. But just be aware that everything we've been painting in the bump is going to look exactly like our normal map is going to look with our regular normals. So it's actually very intuitive, the process that we're using right here. But all we have to do now is, because normal maps aren't generated like a bump map is, it's not using black and white values, it's using that color information instead, the reds, the greens, and the blues. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn on our normal map and we're going to turn off our bump, and we're going to see right here that it looks awful. We can render and we can see we got a lot of issues, and that's because we're not using the proper data. What's so cool is Cinema 4D has a built-in converter to convert a bump map into a proper tangential normal map. And all we have to do is select our normal map, click up here where our thing is, right at this little arrow, open this drop down, go to Effects, and then go to Normalizer. I never even knew this thing was here until I bumped into it one day. We're going to put that on, render it again, and boom, our problem is fixed and it looks just like the bump map. Now, if we click on this, you can get a little preview of what our normal map looks like. And you can see there's the mostly blue with some of the blues and reds and greens in there kind of coming through. And now we can just leave this the same. We could increase our strength to something like maybe 230%. Render again, and we can see way more details popping now. I'm going to keep this at 50 just to keep it kind of nice. Cool is we can actually combine bump and normal all into one to get just kind of a more pungent result, something a little stronger. I like combining both bumps and normals. The normals that you're painting here can be brought over to any program, Unreal Engine, Maya, Unity, any game engine, 3D engine. Port these over, they will work really well, but that's an entire another topic, and there's a lot of issues actually exporting normal maps from Cinema 4D. So if you can get your bump maps out instead, I recommend that, but that's an entirely different topic that I'll make a tutorial on later, most likely. But yep, we have all that good to go right there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to now take our light, and I'm just going to close this for now, and give it some shadows. Just go to an area shadow, and now you can kind of see a little bit of what we got going on here, and you can see the shadows changing, and that's what creates that nice illusion of depth, even though it's a technical flat image. Now, if you already know about normal maps, that it's actually flat what we have, but if you look at it from a distance, it looks like a real 3D depth on the object to create detail. So before this tutorial gets any longer, let's go ahead and make our reflective object like I made in those pictures, because I did say that I was going to show how to make that. So first thing we're going to do is we need a reflective kind of background for it to see. So we're just going to make a sky. I'm just going to go to sky, and then I'm going to go and make a material. Double click, throw it on my sky. Open this up, go turn off color, turn off reflectance, and go to luminance, check that on, and click over content browser, search, and type in HDRI and press enter. I'm going to open this one here, or sorry, we're going to type in HDRI, press enter, and we're going to click on the top one. Scroll down to HDRI 18 because that's my favorite. Pull this one over here, throw it in, and now we have an HDRI for it to reflect in our scene. And now what we're going to do is open up this here, our texture. And now this is literally all we have to do. If we made this reflectance right now, we click reflectance. We have our specular by default. If I add a Beckman right here, we click render. You can see we're already getting some details, kind of like the object I made before, but here's what we're going to do slightly different. First thing is I'm going to set my render to the physical, because you don't have to do this. This is just because I want to. Just for me, because I like that better. I prefer progressive physical render over the standard. But to do that, all you do is just set this to a physical here, and then click physical, and then set this to progressive. And now when we render, it's way quicker. And you can see the details that we're getting here on these bumps are nice, but they're not quite like what we got before. And this is how this is how I made that particular effect. Is we're going to take our bump, make sure it's the black and white one, not the, because this is reflectance uses its blurry channels and roughness by black and white images as well, instead of the normal maps color. So make sure you pick the bump and click on the arrow there and do copy. Now hop into reflectance. Click this little roughness thing here. Make sure your layer 1 is selected. And take roughness and twiddle down that arrow. Click this arrow and do paste. Now, if we render, nothing's going to happen. And that is because we have to set our roughness value to something. I'll do 30. Now when we render, I'll let it churn for a little bit to finally see it. But here, you can see that this is very shiny and then very rough. And now we're taking our map and say where it's white, be rough, and where it's not white, where it's black, be shiny. Now we can actually flip this. So with reflectance, it uses white is rough and black is not. But if we take our black point and set this to 1 and our white point set this to 0, we basically flipped it. Now when we render, it's the opposite. White is this spot here where we didn't paint is all rough, and the part where we did is all shiny. I kind of like it the other way though, so I'm just going to undo. And now to fully recreate the effect that I had there for mine, is we're going to take that same channel and we're going to paste that into the layer mask. And now, if we render, we have only reflection on where we painted, and it's only rough there. So what we're going to do is we're going to add another Beckman. We're going to pull layer 1 above 2. And now we have the same effect as if we painted before. Basically, we have the same exact effect as if we painted just directly on it before. So the reason I did this, though, is we can take layer 2, and we can add a little bit of roughness to the base just to make it look a little less perfect. There we go. Now we just have a little roughness going on there. And now finally, to sell this off and make it look just kind of more like what I was doing, so we're going to take our layer 2 strength. I'm going to pull this down to like 15%. To color and set this to a tint of blue. That's how I got that blue into my reflections. Just kind of like something like this. There we go. And I'm going to take my reflectance and pull this up to maybe like 35. Maybe a little higher. 45. We'll render it out. And there you go. That's kind of how I did it. Now, if I set this to a full 100, see that not too relevant. There was some kind of splotchy blockness coming to this. I think that's because this was at white. Yeah, I'm not too sure what that was, but that came out basically when we added those here. So take this value, set this to about 45%. We're going to get that blue coming in from underneath, and this is it. This is the process. Now we have white set. We just need to set this to blue. Kind of a nice, pretty... I did a darker blue, I think, yeah. And there you go. That is how you paint normal maps in Cinema 4D. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this video, please leave a thumbs up. If you disliked this video and thought I rambled on too much and I could have made this a lot quicker and it was just frustrating waiting for me to talk about relevant information, leave a thumbs down, and please hit me up in the comments saying you'd like me to be a little bit more direct with my tutorials, because that is something that I need to work on. Though if you did like this tutorial and you like this style, please also let me know too, and I'll try and adjust my teaching methods to what the community would rather have. But thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you found this helpful, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.